Good afternoon and welcome to OSEA's Geothermal Leadership Forum. My name is Dan Goldberger and I'm the chair of the Ontario Sustainable Energy Association and your host and moderator for today's event. A couple of quick housekeeping rules. Attendees to the webinar can send in some chat questions, and time permitting, we will allow for a few after the three presentations in our part one and after part two, again, if time allows. The webinar is being recorded to the cloud, and we have about 250 registrants today from a really wide-ranging cross-section, all levels of government, academia, industry, financial institutions, and really happy to see that. Today's event will be followed next month by an OSEA webinar on multiple unit residential buildings and deep retrofits, and in June by webinar on ESG. If you're not already a member of OSEA, please consider joining us and subscribe to our listserv. OSEA is already very active in a number of these different technologies and is also presently redoing its website. So please consider becoming active with us as we continue to advocate for low carbon net zero solutions in Ontario. Now I'd like to just quickly give the traditional land acknowledgement for Toronto. We acknowledge the land that we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, including Inuit and Métis. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. So at this time, I'm not going to go over anybody's biography. It's all on the website of OSEA. The presentations will follow in this order. Amy Jacobs, who's with ENWAVE, will be first. Robert Mancini, who's the head of Robert Mancini Associates, and then Gino DeRizzi of Groundheat. Each one will present their own slide deck, and then we'll hopefully be able to take a few questions. So with that, I turn over the podium to Amy.
Thank you. Let me just get this up on screen.
Sure. If you just go back into your slide deck, and in the bottom right, you'll be able to enlarge the slide.
Yeah.
Got to go back into share screen, I think.
Okay. I think it's just the view here. Okay.
Bottom right.
Sorry.
It's
It's
okay.
working on me. Okay. Here we go. Try one more time. You can see this?
Yep, I see it fine. On the bottom right-hand side, you'll be able to enlarge it.
Yeah.
Presentation.
Yeah, it's just every time I'm doing that, it's taking over all of my screen.
Amy, try double clicking on your first slide there on the left.
Can you see the full screen now? Oops.
No, we see the larger presentation slide, but not the full screen.
I wonder if there's just it's a delay.
Amy, can you hear me? It's Robert.
I can. Yep.
Can you try clicking on your first slide on the left? The little slide at the, yeah, double click. Then work? No?
Can you?
We see it fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We see it fine.
All right. Okay. Apologies, of course, there's going to be technical glitches still, 2.5 years into COVID. Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. Thank you, Dan, for having me. We have been quietly working on a few geo projects in the background over the past few years. We've been designing a number of geo-based energy solutions with our partners here in the city of Toronto. We've acquired and upgraded some standalone geosystems for a group of condos in Liberty Village. And we've built a single family home geo district with Mancini Homes Canada and the city of Markham, which I will be talking about in just a minute. Today, I just wanted to start off by introducing you officially to ENWAVE Geo Communities. We launched yesterday. Some of you may have been at the OGA conference and potentially heard some of this little bit of message around it, but I'll try to keep it brief. ENWAVE Geo Communities is about accelerating the adoption of low carbon technology. We believe that there are infinitely smarter ways to heat and cool buildings of all sizes, regardless of the geography. And most certainly we don't have all the answers, but our ambition is to help our partners with delivering commercial and scalable solutions that achieve their low carbon goals, no matter where they're located. We're building sustainable solutions today for the future. Our solutions not only focus on the developer, but ultimately the end users, which are you and I, and each and every one of us. We understand the demands of developers and customers alike, and we can deliver the scalable commercial solutions that are good for our planet. The road ahead of all of us is long as we look to achieve ambitious net zero goals. We believe that GeoExchange technology can accelerate that movement, and we're excited to be along with all of you as part of the journey. So today I wanted to present a little bit about our experience on the Springwater development, which, as I mentioned, we did in partnership with Mancini Homes Canada and is located in the city of Markham. The development was actually just commissioned its first home a few weeks ago, I guess now at this point, and the heating and cooling of the development, this first phase of homes, will be heated and cooled exclusively by GeoExchange technology. ENWAVE sees this model as a prime example of how GeoExchange can be adopted on a large scale and affect widespread change. So as I mentioned, it really truly was a partnership model project with ENWAVE leading the development of the GeoExchange system, Mancini Homes Canada coming forward as a partner and a home builder who wanted to take that next step in home building and have those ambitious goals. And those two parties were really brought together through the city of Markham. The city of Markham had put out their net zero aspirations, and part of that recognition was that moving to a GeoExchange model within the geospace could achieve that. A little bit about the project. So it's the first system of its kind in Canada. 312 homes is what the GeoExchange system will serve. That's a combination of detached, semi-detached, and townhomes. It's a closed loop ambient system with the vertical boreholes being located under the rights of way throughout the development. There is no requirement or need for a central plant, and each individual home has their own heat pump system, which would control their in-home temperatures. As mentioned, the first home was actually starting to be served a few weeks ago, but the occupancy of the development is slated for later this quarter. Just a bit about the home statistics. So 75% improved carbon emissions, which I think many of you are well aware that GeoExchange technology is capable of and is in line with the averages. It's 4 times more efficient than a typical natural gas furnace and 1.6 times more efficient than a standard air conditioner. And there are no fossil fuels, as mentioned, used for heating and cooling in the 312 home phase of the development, and resulting in 60% more energy efficient than a typical new home. I will also mention that Mancini Homes Canada did make other improvements to their building standards beyond the typical Energy Star rating as well, to help attribute to some of the statistics. From a key success drivers perspective, this project really was about bringing partners together that had, the same mind and vision to achieve those low carbon goals and aspirations. So without having a partner, a development partner who wanted to achieve something different and go out of the box, like Mancini Homes Canada, and without having an on-site and willing party in the municipality of Markham, a project like this could be very, very challenging. But because we had those two parties at the table, that was really a driving factor in allowing us to achieve the goal that we set out to do. The experience in infrastructure construction obviously played into the project itself, given that the parties at the table, Mancini Homes Canada, one of the largest home builders, has the ability and the experience to actually develop projects of this size and scale, and ENWAVE bringing our expertise in the infrastructure and in the utility framework also was a key driving factor to figuring out how this exactly would work, how we would coordinate it from a construction perspective, dealing with the different allocations of construction responsibility, all came into critical nature as we were in the final stages of figuring out the arrangement. Early engagement and coordination, I would say this is the other really critical factor in this project that made it successful. And as I mentioned, the city of Markham, had put out their goals and their aspirations and came to the table very, very early to seek a partner to be able to do this. And that's really where a lot of the value and the early work was achieved, was in that engagement and coordination from the very early stages, ensuring that ENWAVE system was going to address the concerns of the city in terms of their engineering process and their review process for plans of subdivision. And the commercial and scalable mindset really comes down to, this is an extremely complex project, or at least felt that way when we were going through it, because it hadn't been done before. And so really putting a mind to how can this solution be scaled and be commercially driven so that it makes sense to each individual homeowner and is something that we can sell to the homeowners ultimately at the end of the day, was really critical in achieving ultimately the design and the business case that we did. On the other side, I did want to bring forward some of the challenges that were faced and how we overcame those different challenges, and potentially as we look to scale this model in the future and to do this again, hopefully in a number of municipalities, certainly across Canada and potentially North America, what are some of the challenges that we can try to get ahead of as a GeoExchange community? Where can we find nuances and ways to work through some of these so that we can make models like this very replicable and scalable? Limited public space speaks for itself. We all know the constraints of building within congested cities or cities with high growth. And so really going back to my earlier comment of working together and getting early engagement with the city was very, very critical in ensuring that the public space was going to be used in the best and most efficient way possible. Locating the boreholes under the rights of way, lots of discussion about where the boreholes would be. Initially weren't intended to be in the right of way, but ultimately made sense to be there, and appropriately everything else in your typical utilities were all sort of intertwined and interdesigned at the same time. The setbacks are a very similar vein of conversation, and really as we look forward to scale this model, the setback requirements for utilities are quite restrictive, and looking into doing this again, would require a municipality to come to the table and have some conversations about how those setbacks could be adjusted to accommodate the geosystem and what that may mean going forward. Funding, this could have been more a point in time concern, but funding for the project was tight and not overly accessible. There was some TAF funding that was received by the city for this project and went into the project itself, related to sort of the pilot part of it, or the pilot aspect of it. But as we look to, again, replicate this and scale this on a commercial level and really take this model forward, you know, having a funding mechanism that would acknowledge, you know, maybe it's at the homeowner level, and versus a developer or the geo provider level, but having an acknowledgement that people are making the steps to a cleaner future and a greener future, and putting some compensation there to recognize that we're accelerating that development. The education and saleability to market, again, just this concept of, you know, as a homeowner, not really being familiar with this. You know, most homeowners or home buyers are going out there very well aware of Energy Star, very well aware of a traditional HVAC system, but not as comfortable with a concept of a green home or a net zero home. And so really getting out there and educating the market as to why this is a great setup for them, why this makes sense in their home, and identifying how it works and the simplicity of it all, to really try to peel back the layers of risks that the public sees with this, would be critical as, again, we look to scale this at a larger level and reach a wider marketplace. Lastly, the last challenge just ties back in with the other points and is opposite to, I guess, some of the key success factors. It really ties into that integration in the typical development process. So again, the home building process is quite robust. There's a lot of various components and moving pieces, and ensuring that the GeoExchange system, or the development of the heating and cooling system, is integrated and considered through all stages, part of the engineering reviews and the submissions to the city, and really ensuring that close alignment all the way through. So in summary, this model really is truly a model for success in the single family home space. It accelerates the adoption of low carbon technology to everyday users. Residential development, as we all know, is anticipated to continue to rise over the next decade, and we don't see in the near term any slowdown on that. So really being able to address that growing population of homes and ensuring that we're building now for our future really is important. The alignment with municipalities to achieve net zero targets. This is a great way for municipalities to make movements against their targets to net zero goals, by being able to come in and do a completely new development, residential development that has net zero aspirations or is net zero ready, really would accelerate that movement towards the ultimate clean goal. It's a new design standard that could be adopted for home builders. Again, everyone's very well aware and very familiar with the Energy Star rating, and really what is that next level of design standard that, you know, could this be incorporated and a bit more widely recognized to help with that approach to market and to that education component, and really getting it out, getting the message out there and getting people familiar with what GeoExchange is and how it works, and why it's, you know, an equivalent technology in terms of ease and use to a traditional HVAC system, but so much better for the future and for the environment. And lastly, the model truly is scalable to development size, home type, and even potentially to retrofits. So really starting to look at how we can apply that model to those different categories and to those different size of developments really lends itself to a strong message and a strong support for how we continue to grow with this model. And that's all I had. So thank you for the time. And as Dan said, I think if there's questions, they go through the chat box. And otherwise, hope to hear from you after. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. That was great. Robert, you're now on next. You have to unmute yourself as well.
Mute.
There you go.
And hold on for a second. where's my start video? If you want. Okay, so we're going to have a look and see if we can share this screen. Okay. I hope that's the right one. Is this the right one?
It's
I
good.
think it's the right one, but you won't. There we go. Okay. So this presentation is for a very unique type of building or community, actually. We've been working in this space for some time, the geothermal space for some time, and we basically back to the middle of the 1980s, we started into commercial institutional designing them from the ground up because there was absolutely nothing at that point. And a few years ago, back in 2012, we working in the net zero energy space, and we're continuing with some of our projects for utilities. So we're changing our ways as we go along. We've managed to create some very energy efficient buildings, including the last one was a net zero carbon building for the city of Toronto. It's a daycare center. It was about 20,000 square feet. It's not a large building, but in any case, one of the things that we're talking about is aquifer thermal energy storage. In this particular presentation, we deal with energy, ATAS, what we call ATAS, or aquifer thermal energy storage. The other acronym that you'll see in the presentation is borehole thermal energy storage, which is basically, that's a closed loop vertical system. And I can reassure you that every one of these buildings that have a borehole system, most buildings actually are served by BTAS. They're all storing energy. They're storing energy that is rejected in the summertime and it's reused in the wintertime for heating. It doesn't go away. So this particular presentation, as I mentioned before, is about the Hub. The Hub is a student community in Waterloo, Ontario. It is the largest ATAS system in Canada currently. I don't know if there's anything up that will be larger. It could be. As far as the design team, it involved our company, and we worked with Wilson Associates for our hydrogeological work. And the construction on the system was done by Groundheat Systems Incorporated. This is a tour of the project. And you will see that there are 5 tall buildings and a number of actually 3 smaller buildings. And at the intersection of Columbia Street West and Albert Street in Waterloo, just to give you a perspective of where this is actually located with respect to the universities. There's the University of Waterloo. On one side here, you can walk to the University of Waterloo from the site, or Laurier. So it's quite convenient for students. Why did we choose an ATAS system? Well, the initial testing that was done on site, this is the C448 requirements, revealed that there was a lot of water in the ground, and it was kind of difficult to even drill in that location in terms of the amount of water that was coming out. The other good reason was to reduce costs. Actually, this an ATAS system costs about 50% less than a borehole thermal energy system. So there are some other requirements, of course, that must be met that would not necessarily be met with or required to be met with a closed loop system. So I'll go into those a little bit later in the presentation here. But basically, this is a typical AS system. We have a supply well system with typically with submersible pumps. We have sediment separators that pull out things. For instance, as these are typically centrifugal type units that remove sand, anything that comes through the system. And then we have a plate frame heat exchanger to separate the groundwater system from the heat pump system in the building. The reason for that is that typically water will not be as clean as you might think. There are lots of chemicals and so forth, so we don't want that to foul the heat pump units. And then from the on the groundwater side, we go return the water back to the same aquifer. So what we're actually doing is creating a circulation in the bedrock. In this particular case, is about 200 and some odd feet of overburden. Then we're into rock, the induced. So we're actually inducing a flow from the pumping system to the return and back to the pump. Okay. A lot of people don't understand sometimes that aquifer flow is normal aquifer flow is quite slow. It could be as slow, actually even slower than 0.3 meters per decade. So it's very, very slow. The water doesn't go away, the heat doesn't go away. So it's whatever you store into that water system also conducts to the rock. So you have a huge mass of material to help you with the storage of heat and dissipation of heat back to the system. Some of the challenges, we were challenged by the region of Waterloo. We quickly build wells to Ontario Regulation 903. In this particular case, we had to go well beyond that because they were quite concerned about intermixing aquifers. What we found out was that they are actually using an aquifer at about the 200-foot level, just above the 200-foot level. And that's for domestic water use. They're actually pulling water out of that and putting it into the municipal system. So they didn't want any mixing to occur, particularly because, as I mentioned before, water, especially water down in the lower aquifers, it can be pretty nasty, actually, with chemicals and so forth. So the other thing that adequate aquifer that they would accept, and they certainly wouldn't accept us pulling water out of their aquifer, which is at the upper level. They wanted us to go deeper, so we had to actually go down as far as 525 feet with our wells, and these are not small wells. They're 10-inch diameter supply and 8-inch returns. So one of the things, the other challenge was to answer their questions about thermal pollution. And that's one of the things that, we hadn't come across before as far as thermal pollution, or calling it thermal pollution. But that's what they termed it. And they wanted to make absolutely sure that we would not interfere with temperatures in the ground or change the temperatures. So we actually had to go through exhaustive models to work out those temperatures that they were satisfied, and we actually did do that. Fortunately, the energy balance in the project is pretty neutral. It's pretty there. The energy extracted is pretty much equal to the energy rejected. So it wasn't a really hard thing to do. But anyways, it was a bit of a challenge. Some of the project statistics here. We are the building is. There are 5 14-story buildings here, 3 8-story buildings, a total of 604 rental units, and 35,500 square feet of ground floor commercial space. There's also a huge parking lot underneath, but that is not heated. So the project was commissioned in December 2018 and has been running ever since. Just some system statistics. We have 2 supply wells. These are, as I mentioned before, 10-inch diameter supply wells, each one with a pump. The wells were drilled down to 525 feet, well below the overburden, which ends at about 230 feet. There are 2 major aquifers in the overburden, and those are the ones that are used by the region of Waterloo for city water supply. And those are roughly at about 190 feet in depth. There are 3 below that, we have 3 aquifers in the fractured rock. This is mostly fractured limestone that feeds our system. The chemistry is not very nice. It's not anywhere close to being drinking water. Our pumps are set at 220 feet, which is actually fairly high above that 500 feet, but we needed that sump of water in order to make the system work efficiently. Just to give you an idea of locations, again, we're looking at this. This is a bird's eye view, I guess, or whatever view. Supply wells here on the west side of the property. There's 2 of them, and about 665 feet to the other side, we have 2 recharge wells. These are 8-inch diameter, by the way. The reason we went with 10s on the other side is just to accommodate the pump diameter.
Please wrap up, Rob.
Okay, so here's these are the wells that you'll see on the ground. The supply well number 1 is on the west side. Supply number 2 on the other, in the same side, but the fence. These are the 2 return wells, or recharge wells, as we call them, on the Albert side of the street. To give you an idea of energy use, this was modeled. We don't have actual data on the building usage because the owners are not very interested in sharing that information. So we're looking at roughly about 12.5 equivalent kilowatt hours per square foot per year. And a little bit of history systems. This is a little 18 lot subdivision in Sudbury where we used this an interesting system which developed, which is a sewer heat recovery system. I'm not going to talk much about that. Just a bit of history. That's it for me.
Thank you, Robert. That was great.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate that. Okay, please end your screen share, and Gino, you can open up your slides.
Okay, let's see here.
Robert, you may have to stop sharing your screen.
Yep.
Perfect.
I'm not sure it's the right one, but let's see.
It is the right one. Go ahead.
Yeah, the last one. Well, good afternoon, and first of all, thank you, Dan and OSEA for this webinar and introducing us to the district geothermal projects as a theme. My name is Gino DeRezzi. To give you a little bit about myself, I'm a professional engineer with 40+ years experience in geothermal. Over done approximately 1,500 plus projects in 3 continents. And while we're working in the other parts of the world, we established offices temporarily in the other areas, but Toronto's been our home base for Canada, and but we've had offices in Vancouver, Erie, Pennsylvania, Rome, and Shenzhen, China. Just a quick intro to geothermal. Very quickly, the geothermal energy is thermal energy in the Earth's crust. It harnesses and extracts heat from the ground in 2 ways. One is high temperature steam, which generates electricity, or in our case, what we'll be talking about is low temperature thermal for cooling and heating. Now, the high temperature is first recorded drilling project in Lardorello, Tuscany, Italy in 1904. The site, I've been on the site, and it has 180 wells at 150 meters deep, which is unusual shallow, supplying steam for 34 plants. The well temperatures exceeds 150 Celsius. However, in the low temperature, what we're doing is a constant at approximately 12 to 14 degrees Celsius temperature, almost anywhere in any ground or water, either by drilling vertically 200 meters or shallow horizontal trenching by 1.2, 1.5 meters deep. Our thermal is used for cooling and heating applications. The first application goes far back as 1940. Actually, they used some of these water source heat pumps on the submarines. The low temperature, let's see here. The low temperature systems, the 3 key district heating. There's 3 key projects that we did in the last 17 years. One of them was University of Ontario campus, 800,000 square feet, 370 wells at 200 meters, which is around 2,000 tons. This was the largest in North America back in 2005. In Rome, Italy, the Dahlias, 21 buildings. In 2006 to 2012, it's still the Europe's largest in residential low-rise buildings. In Waterloo, Ontario, like Robert mentioned, we were project managers for the hub, and this is Canada's largest. Let's focus on, for this webinar, I want to give you some information on the Rome project, which was completed in 2012 and still going strong. The Rome project is called the Dahlias. It was named by the architect, Paolo Bortoghese, and world-renowned. It's located around 7 miles northeast of the Colosseum. There are 21 mid-size elegant buildings of 1,000 plus apartments with 22 commercial centers, which gives some diversity. There's over 200 wells at 650 feet or 200 meters, using double U-bend. Double U-bend instead of a single U-bend in the hole. And it's about 1.5 megawatt capacity. The estimated savings is 50% cooling and 70% heating. But with the gas going up and the electricity going up, we may end up being 60, 70% cooling and maybe 80, 90% heat. The COPs are pretty high. This is a bird's eye view of the project. And if you see the project, you'll see a whole bunch of little clusters of buildings on different parts. And there's these areas here has got some commercial units so that they have some kind of diversity in. And the drilling is done in the center of the courtyard of the buildings. The name of the project called the Dahlia, and if you see all these are the Dahlia, different Dahlia clusters. And it was named, that's the name that the architect gave. So these are the protagonists of the project. Barbara Mezzaroma is a renegade developer of the family. She wanted to do something green, and she interviewed a few high-level architects and chose Paulo Portuguese as the architect. She also interviewed a few high-level engineers and chose Sergio Giuseppini, and they were the team, and then interviewed us, even though her cousins had a small geothermal company, used us as the geothermal company of choice. Good choice. This is the construction site, the cranes in Rome. The construction did slow down a little bit because the 2008, 2010, 2008, 2010, and problems with the financing problems. The project is about 1.2 megawatt cooling, 1.5 megawatt heating. Like I mentioned before, is over 200 probes or loops, and approximately 200 meters deep. We went there to do a test hole. We found people with little trowels and brushes, and what they were doing, the archaeologists were doing some investigating, and they found they unearthed some Roman era carriage tracks. And for a while we thought they were going to stop us, but apparently they just took a photograph, recorded it, cataloged it, and told us to go ahead. Sorry about this. I'm good in geothermal, but I'm not very good in doing the presentations here. These are the drilling machines. Actually, we brought some of these drilling machines in Canada back in 2008. Before that, there was only single rotary geothermal, and then we brought the double rotary geothermal. Amy's project was done with double rotary, and before 2008, there was no double rotary. So we by bringing these machines in, we improved the whole industry, and the industry also did some more. So also in the bottom right corner, you see the probes coming in. We're just ready to, once we drill the test hole, now we're ready to do the conductivity test. So you see the double, if you look at the bottom here, they have double U-bends in every one, so that improves the capacity. And this is common, whereas this is common in Europe, where in Canada or North America is just beginning to take notice. So the thing is that these systems, the 1,000 apartments have to look elegant from the point of view of the building, but they also have to, the job also has to look good underneath the ground. So this is the way the Italians work. So this is the entrance to the building. So the mechanical room is 10,000 square feet underneath one of those 21 buildings. This is the final connection to the mechanical room. And on the left, this is the prefabrication manifold. This is where the pipes are coming in into the mechanical room to the outside. And this is again, the 10,000 square foot mechanical room, and it's nice and clean and high quality. These are the circulating pumps feeding the buildings. We used two major brands, the Daikin and the Carrier. There were four heat pumps, approximately 400 tons each.
Please wrap up, Gino.
Yeah, okay. So this is one of our engineers in Rome. We use the cogen system to peak demands and for hot water. And for the cogen system, instead of using normal oils, they use the Jatropia carcassus plants. They're grown in the desert with little water. They also, while the rejection of heat from the cogen went into the absorption system, which also give you chilled water and hot water. So that in the summer, they give you chilled water, in the winter, they let the hot water come out of the cogen. This was also centrally computerized, and each apartment was energy metered. This is the engineer of Mazzaroma, or the project, and he's Adam and Sailor. I just want to take one minute here, if possible. You know, over the last 40 years, we've come a long way. None of us were born learned. We're at the benefit of people before us. And if on the Canadian side, you have Professor Frank Cooper, who did the research in geothermal as far back as 1948, and he passed away last year. Lars Beck, he did the research on the vertical slinkies, if you recall, it's called Beck spiral, and he passed away a while back. Also this year, we lost Dr. Bose, and Bose is a giant in the geothermal business. He is a professor in Oklahoma State and IXPA founder. And another fellow that North Americans don't know, but his name is Paul Mogensen. He passed away a few months ago. And he was here in Canada back in '85 when we were doing a 150 home in Richmond Hill. And he told me then, and he started the TRT, the conductivity test. So he's the master of the conductivity, and because of him, we do the conductivity test on buildings. He passed away a few months ago, and we should honor these people, because if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't be here now with this in our industry. Thank you for your patience. I hope we do a lot of geothermal communities.
Thank you, Gino. Maybe you can end your screen share.
You sure?
In the interest of time, I think we need to move on. We do have an expert panel with us. So I would ask those folks to come on screen, and Gino, maybe you can go off screen at this time. So Morgan McGregor, Tim Weber, Jessica Robold, and Jonathan Frank are all with us. What I propose to do here is to ask each of you to answer these questions sort of in as brief and concise a manner as possible. It's clear we're going to go over time. And my first question to you is, how do each of you envisage the future for geo communities? Will it be central plant for heating and cooling, or do you see individual homes, for example, in communities that we saw with ENWAVE being connected? And how would you see the load balancing occurring as a result? Maybe we can start with Tim.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. It's a great question. You know, I think it's important, you know, when you look at, you know, the electrification of buildings, whether it's a community, single building, a cluster of buildings, would be condos, apartments, office buildings, commercial retail. I think it's easy to over-index on whether it's a central plant, whether it's a district energy or standalone systems or an ambient loop. I think, you know, those applications work depending on, you know, the number of buildings, the phasing, the diversity. But I think what's more important is just the electrification. You know, that geothermal is going into these buildings, whether it's a single loop or multiple loops, you're accomplishing the same thing. You're displacing natural gas, you're eliminating fossil fuels. You know, we're doing some projects right now that are, you know, half a dozen high rises, 40 to 70 stories, and it made more sense to go with individual loops because they're condos and shared service agreements, legalities. It just made it simpler, but the end result is no natural gas for heating and cooling. And ultimately, I think that's what matters, not how you structure the bore field.
Terrific. Any thoughts, Morgan, on that?
Yeah, I think I tend to agree. I mean, I think Amy mentioned this, but really, you know, the future is the need to move to these low carbon approaches, and municipalities are looking for a way to accelerate the process of getting there. I think, as Tim said, there isn't necessarily one size fits all. I think from our perspective, the key is really what works in each situation and what can we do that's replicable and scalable within those different models, I would say. So, you know, we've got, you know, we talked about single family homes, you know, and then standalone buildings in a retrofit scenario. I think there's opportunity for district scale where, you know, you have new development areas and you can capture adjacent buildings as well into that process. And again, it comes back to sort of simplifying that process for the developer and the homeowner to make it really accessible, I would say, at a large scale. So I think that's key in terms of
Terrific.
where we go.
Terrific. Jessica?
Yes, in agreement with Tim and Morgan. So it's definitely a project by project analysis that we're looking at. We're working on a 300 home community in Ottawa right now, and they've opted to go with this single bore per home approach. And it's just based on project goals. So they're able to deliver on a block by block basis and have closings consecutively. On that site, there really wasn't the load diversity. So we weren't taking advantage of, for example, a data center and an ice rink that you can really maximize the load diversity for efficiency. We were also able to avoid any right of way that would potentially delay the particular project in that municipality. So again, you could have projects that look very similar, but pending the project goals, as long as we can get that project electrified, that's the main goal.
Okay, terrific. And Jonathan, you've seen a lot of different projects. How is your thinking changing now to seeing on a community basis how it might work best based on your experience?
I think one of the beautiful things of geotechnology, similar to other renewables, is that it is highly scalable and you don't need a one solution fits all approach. And we've seen this work in individual homes being retrofitted, large subdivisions being planned from the very beginning to be geo, and new build townhouses and condo towers. So in all cases, the technical solution is often designed for that specific case and context. And as each new project is done, the industry builds expertise and experience and track record to build on. And I think what is often most important in this stage of the market's development is the business model innovation and coming together with creative partnerships, like we heard Amy talk about earlier. Okay,
terrific. The next question I have a real interest in is the financial community and how they're perceiving and understanding how geothermal can be, how GeoExchange can be scaled. So you're looking at financial institutions like Vancity and others, both from the debt and equity side. We know that Subterra works with Forum Equity Partners, insurers who now see lower operating and maintenance costs and low climate change risk with a more resilient infrastructure owing on behalf of geothermal. And of course, the interest from utilities. So I'm just wondering how people are perceiving the receptivity, if you will, of the broader financial institutional community to scaling up and creating larger projects. Maybe we can start this time with Jonathan, who's in that industry.
Yeah, so we financed our first geo projects about 5 years ago now, and have since been involved in probably about 900 single family homes and a handful and more of townhouse and condo complexes. And our experience is that the same way we would approach any other renewable energy project financing, we can undertake the necessary technical, legal, and financial diligence to prove that a project will work prior to moving forward. And we've been able to do that across all these projects across multiple jurisdictions. So the technical, financial, and legal structures all pass muster, and we find that these projects are highly financeable. The partners involved are highly reputable, can point to a long track record. And as a result, we can get our investment and credit committee approvals to finance these projects even during the construction phase. And we're going to see this continue to mature in the coming years. I think we're entering a really exciting acceleration phase in the market where more and more financial institutions are seeing that this is a viable technology that we can build on.
Terrific. Morgan, obviously coming from ENWAVE and with your backers being pension funds, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what Jonathan is saying. I think there's a lot of interest in investing in this asset class and type, and people are looking for a mechanism, and Jonathan mentioned, sort of credible partners to be able to do that with. So I think that's key, and comes back to what we were talking about with the sort of scalable model, putting things in a portfolio, and then proven track record of being able to deliver on them. I think to your point about our particular backing in scenario, there's high level of interest there, and I think that's one of the advantages we have is that we have those sort of robust institutional investors that are looking for that long-term investment, and when you're able to do that and finance accordingly on competitive terms, you can pass that through ultimately to sort of the end users, which is what you want to do to sort of make that more competitive and just further the cycle of development and expansion of the industry. So
perfect. Jessica.
Yes, in agreement. I think that with partners like VCIB and Forum Equity Partners, who have really been early to think outside of the box and look at how renewable technologies are truly more resilient and how they are low risk, has really been a key for us at Subterra to bring renewable to developers and ultimately to the end users, because some of the more older style banking groups have been slower to look at these technologies. So the creative partners have really enabled groups like ourselves bring us to the market at a greater scale. And it's really looking at it at multiple layers and saying, how do we make this tangible for our developer community to implement? Because they're also thinking about challenges which are not only building different conventional style, which isn't necessarily always about the resiliency and delivering low carbon. They truly do want to bring low carbon communities, but it's also about the construction challenges and timeline impact. So having them understand those challenges holistically with partners like VCIB and Forum has enabled us to bring those projects to life.
Perfect answer. Tim, Diverso's a leader in the field as well. Maybe you can explain how you've been received by the financial community.
Yeah, that's a bit of a loaded question. I think, if I look back 8 years ago when we started, clearly it was a challenge. We were sort of trailblazing. Nobody was really doing this yet. And fortunately, we did have, as Morgan correctly identified, that proof of concept and track record, not through the utility model, but at least from a technology standpoint. And we had data, so that was extremely helpful. But, one of the things we realized quickly is there's lots of financial institutions that are attracted to the renewable space, but at the end of the day, they're still financial institutions. So, their perspective on returns and risk are still what they are, right? And with geothermal being somewhat new, and on top of that, one of the things that was a priority for us was a performance guarantee in our contract. So if our system doesn't perform, we don't get paid. That scared off a lot of potential investors or partners. So Fortunately, we did end up landing on a pension fund as well, similar to ENWAVE out of Quebec, and that was a good fit. They're providing 100% equity, so there is not debt involved as of yet, but there could be. The challenge with looking just at debt for geothermal is you still need equity because it's typically 70-75% loan to value. The other challenge with the utility model for geothermal is we're off balance sheet, so it's unsecured. We're during construction, we're kind of hanging out in the wind. We're not registered on the mortgage, we're not in the capital stack. So that sometimes can scare off more conventional institutions who are unfamiliar with that level of unsecurity. But then there's also the lenders for our projects. And that's a whole other conversation because they don't really know what to do with this business model because we're not contractors, we're not lenders, we're not subordinate debt. We're off balance sheet, but yet we're kind of like equity, but not really. So that's been a bit of a learning curve. Fortunately, we've now worked with, I think, most of the SCED banks, and they're starting to come around to this idea. But that was certainly a hurdle that we had to overcome, and still continuing to overcome.
Thank you,
But
Tim.
there's no shortage of money out there looking for a home.
Yeah, no, those are all great answers, and I think you adequately answered that. So my final question, I guess, is a two-part question. One is, I think we would all acknowledge that one problem the industry does face is capacity for drilling, capacity for installers, modelers, training, and getting consulting engineers to understand that this is an option that could be spec'd into a new building or new community. How do each of you see that being addressed, and to put us on a more level playing field with some of our adjacent competitors who are putting a lot of effort into this, thinking of New York now. What can we do? What should we do as an industry to advance this? Maybe we can start with you, Tim, this time.
Yeah, I think I'd have to separate that question into two different segments of the market: the single-family homes, and then there's the high-rise, multi-res commercial. I think for a single-family home, similar to you identified in New York, I think incentives are extremely important because you have homeowners who aren't really driven by ESGs or policy. They just straight up economics, and with the price of natural gas and the cost to install geothermal, there needs to be some type of incentive to bridge that gap. Now in the commercial space, if you asked me this question 2 years ago, I would have said we need policy, we need municipalities to kind of force the hand, drive developers out of their comfort zone and kind of shift from the carrot to the stick. Asking me today, I would say we need more help on the ability to deliver. Drilling capacity is a huge problem right now. There's no shortage of opportunity. I'm sure Jessica's in the same boat. Funnel has exploded in the last 6 months. Now the question is, how are we going to deliver on all of this? And that's where we're trying to bring drillers in from Alberta. That was working well when the oil and gas industry was experiencing a downturn. Well, now there's a bit of an uptake in that, so they're kind of attracted back to the oil sands. So that's one opportunity. And then also just funding being available for local drillers in Ontario to grow their infrastructure. But then you get into labor shortages. Drilling's not easy, it's not fun, and trying to convince young people to get into that trade is also a huge uphill challenge that we're trying to figure out. And without geothermal drilling, there's no geothermal. Without geothermal, it's very difficult to electrify these buildings, and if we can't do that, we're not going to hit our climate change targets. So it's certainly a huge challenge, and I don't have an exact answer really.
Okay, no problem. It's a good all-around summation. Jessica, what are your thoughts on these kind of constraints that we're seeing in the industry?
Absolutely, seeing the same constraints in terms of drilling capacity and really labor availability as well. We've become a vertically integrated organization, so we do our own geothermal drilling, but attracting labor to the market and having that kind of connotation that people don't want to go into geothermal drilling is really a challenge. So if there was some support from education and universities, colleges to bring these programs and to bring awareness to these programs. I think that the young generation is very aware that climate change is an issue that we need to tackle. It's something that the young generation has been born into, so very familiar with. So I think raising awareness about the opportunity that exists for a career in renewables doesn't necessarily end at labor as a part of that. So I think we need to bring that to the forefront. I think that in terms of incentives and kind of regulation, we know that in our projects, it really varies from municipality to municipality what permits are required to do geothermal. So if we could bring some clarity to how that works, I think that would also help with bringing projects to life and making it easier for the developer community to understand timelines that are tangible for implementing geothermal systems. And then, as Tim mentioned, incentives at the homeowner level have obviously been very effective in New York and south of the border. So I think that would only continue to support and bolster the adoption of geothermal technology.
Perfect. Thank you, Jessica. Jonathan, as a lender and an investor of record, how do you see the constraints when you evaluate these projects as we try to scale up?
I mean, I think the groups like Diverso and Subterra and ENWAVE, they're managing it right now for sure. We're seeing projects get built. The flow of new projects into us seeking financing is continuous and growing. So we're not seeing that and feeling that on our side just yet. I do think that there's sort of some multi-solving that can happen here, in the same way that this is about lowering our carbon emissions. It's also about jobs and economic development. And I think seeing geo as an industry that can do all three at once is really important. Mm-hmm. And I think in general, it's a tough industry to promote. I spent a lot of time in solar, and it's very photogenic. That solar panel is a symbol of being green, and you can send a drone up to take a beautiful image and video. And geo, you can walk past a building that's geo and have no idea. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a real challenge. So I'd love to see the industry come together to do some more broader awareness and building. I'd love to see a geo map across the country, where all the developers and contractors can submit their projects. And together, I think grow that awareness, grow the pie of the market. And as the market accelerates, it becomes more exciting for young people to get into. So you get a self-reinforcing feedback loop there.
Terrific answer. Morgan, what are your thoughts on the constraints you're seeing and how you would envisage putting those resolving those constraints going forward?
Yeah, so I think this is where just some thoughtful, kind of where Jonathan was going, sort of longer term views and planning needs to come in. So I think I'm thinking along the lines of what Jessica was alluding to, and we've got a lot of talented and ambitious people in this province and across the country. And I think people do have a genuine interest in doing something on a day-to-day basis that makes a difference. I think the green energy trades is part of that. So we've seen this across multiple industries in the infrastructure sector in terms of attracting, that talent and resource. And I think it's just a really big push, which is going to require, support at multiple levels and funding at multiple levels to really put that spotlight and attention on sort of that training, so that we can, essentially gear up and have that forward planning for that pipeline of projects we see coming. And that same thing applies in terms of the assets themselves when we're talking about, drilling rigs and infrastructure and these sorts of things, right? If we can, we can show and, sort of policies at various levels of government and through development show that pipeline of opportunities is real. People are and will be and continue to be, I think, willing to invest, and we will be able to get there and to catch up. But I think, I think the other sort of last point I'll make, switching a little bit to we're talking about the incentives piece and funding and homeowner support, for example. I agree 100% with what was said. I think the other thing I would add is, regardless of sort of funding opportunities and sources and programs, and whether you go with tax credits or something else, one of the key things I think to really drive this in terms of actually getting this implemented at scale is making it simple. So simplifying the process, whether you're talking about multi-unit residential or single family homes, because, no amount of dollars, regardless, of what that can look like from a percentage, will tip the, tip the boat, so to speak, if the process is too difficult or onerous for people to work through. And so I think that, it needs to be a key focal point in whatever we do in terms of structuring these programs. So.
Terrific. Listen, I'm kind of mindful of our time, and we have gone over the allotted hour. So there were some general questions about operating and maintaining geosystems and system performance with existing projects that were presented. And I think that everybody shared their coordinates online. So perhaps you can ask those questions directly to the presenter that you had in mind. I wanted to thank all of our leaders in geothermal and GeoExchange, as it's better called, for being available today to share some leading community presentations, as well as their thoughts on how we can scale up and move this industry forward. And I'm very thankful to all of you that have attended today's event as well. And please look forward to future OSEA events. Thank you so much. Have a great afternoon, everyone.